When Red challenges the Vermilion Gym with no preparation, it leads to Pikachu having a crushing defeat by his evolved form, a Raichu. The loss makes him feel like he's weak and worthless until he evolves, but maybe some time on the SS. And will help him regain his confidence. XXX. I really don't know why Red wanted to challenge the gym so soon. We'd only been to 2 other gyms, but our method for taking on those was the same. Take a whole day to train and prepare before challenging the gym. But I guess if we were doing this now, it showed how much confidence Red in our chances of winning. And that was just fine with me. This gym, according to Red, specialized in electric-type Pokémon. Since he didn't have any Pokémon with moves that were effective against that type and 2 who were weak to it, Red said he was going to rely on me, Bulbasaur and Charmander to get through. Another chance for me to shine. This gym, though, was different from the last 2. We couldn't just go and challenge the gym leader. Red had to solve a puzzle involving switches and many trash cans. He had to do it to power down an electrified gate that blocked the way to the gym leader. There were also trainers in the gym who would give Red tips if we beat them in a battle, which we did. It might have taken a while, but we were able to stop the electricity and enter through the doors leading to the back room. Now we were able to meet the gym leader. "What do you think you're doing here so late at night, kid? Ain't it past your bedtime?" the man asked, arching an eyebrow. He was very tall and about as muscly as a Machop, with short hair as yellow as my fur and piercing blue eyes. I felt Red stiffen from my place on his shoulder, and I understand why. This man was actually pretty intimidating looking. Red cleared his throat. "I'm Red Ketchum, and I'm here to challenge you for my 3rd gym badge." The blonde man stared hard at us before laughing. "Ha ha ha ha. Are you actually serious?" He pointed a finger at us while smirking. "The name's Surge, boy. Lieutenant Surge. My Pokémon and I haven't just fought in mere Pokémon battles. We've fought in the war. And in the end, a Pokémon battle is just like a war. My Pokémon saved me by zapping my enemies, and they'll do the same to your Pokémon. Do you think you belong on the battlefield? Answer me when I'm talking to you, boy." Red stiffened once again and spoke. "Why yes, I do." LT. Surge's smirk faded as he took out a Pokeball. Then prepared to be shocked back into reality. In a flash of light, his first Pokémon appeared beside him. It looked kind of like me. It was bigger though, and bright orange. It had yellow cheeks, big feet, and a long black tail that ended in a long yellow lightning bolt shape. It jumped forward with a cry and landed in the middle of the battlefield in the center of the room. "I'm in a rotten mood after having my gym vandalized and I wanna get out of here as soon as possible. So I'll tell ya what. If you can knock out my Raichu, I'll give you a Thunder badge." Really? Red seemed to relax a bit, but was now confused. I, however, was happy. Only one opponent meant this would be an easy victory. "Of course, you can only use one Pokémon, too," said Surge. "I'm in a rush, so I'd rather just zap you into submission straight away with the strongest option, for a greenhorn like you, anyway." My cheer immediately vanished. "Oh, well, still no problem. So go on. Choose the Pokémon that'll get pummeled by Raichu. Yeah, come on. Bring it on, soldier." The Raichu exclaimed as he folded his arms across his chest, frowning all the while. Red looked down at the floor in thought while I glared at him. Was he seriously thinking of choosing anyone but me to fight? I gave him a little whack in the back of his head with my tail to bring his attention to me. "Oh, I guess my ace would be the best option against his ace. You know it," I proclaimed. Without even waiting for Red's command, I leapt off of his shoulder and ran onto the battlefield. "Hey, you're using a Pikachu. Isn't that a little unwise?" Surge asked with a smirk that was shared by his Raichu. "Raichu's the evolved form of Pikachu. That means my Raichu can do everything a Pikachu can do, but stronger and better." I was shocked. I didn't think I could evolve anymore. Surge gave a short laugh before pointing forward. Raichu. Use quick attack. Use double team with quick attack. Red exclaimed. I began to use the same tactic I did in the Cerulean gym. I ran around, making copies as I did, hoping to confuse the Raichu. The Raichu just stood there, staring forward. After a while, he suddenly dropped on all fours and dashed forward, becoming an orange blur as he ran right into me. The force of his tackle seriously knocked the wind out of me and sent me rolling along the battlefield. Mega Punch. I heard Surge shout. Move, Pikachu. I got back on my feet in time to run out of the way as the Raichu pounced at me. His paw glowed bright white before it punched the floor, causing it to make a deep dent. Use quick attack to get in several blows. I growled as I began tackling into the Raichu. Body slam. Surge commanded. I only hit Raichu a couple of times before he jumped up into the air and managed to drop on top of me before I could get out of the way. I squirmed as I struggled to climb out from under the bigger electric type. You've got it pinned. Now use submission to toss that Pikachu up into the air. Raichu got off of me only to grab hold of me. He started to roll around with me in his paws, slamming me down forcefully on the floor each time he did. It went like that for a while before the Raichu landed on his feet, slammed me down on the floor by my tail, and then tossed me up high into the air. Now use Mega Punch. Block it with Slam. Although Red didn't sound all that confident in his command, I recovered in midair despite still reeling from the pain of that submission. I adjusted myself so I would land tail first, thinking that I really could block Raichu's punch with my tail alone. I looked down in time to see the Raichu smirk as its paw glowed bright white. Seconds before I thought my tail would hit it, the Raichu jumped back, dodging my tail slam, and punched me square in the face, effectively knocking me out. XXX. Chapter 8. Aboard the SS. I woke up with a start. I was inside of my Pokeball. I didn't have to pop outside to ask what that meant. I lost. I lost the challenge for Red. I couldn't help but sulk. How pathetic was I to have been able to take down a giant Onix and a Psychic Starmie, but not another electric-type Pokemon. And one I would evolve into at that. What made that Raichu so different from those two? Was that Surge guy right? Was Raichu just superior to me? Looking back on it, I'd always been told similar as a Pichu living in the forest. My parents always said it was okay to confront the Weedle, the Nidoran, the Pidgey, and the Spearow that may harass me, but never the bigger ones. Never the Beedrill or the Pidgeotto. They were stronger and they could endure my puny electric attacks better than they would a full-grown Pikachu's. But not even a Pikachu should go up against something like a Pidgeot or Fearow, who would probably crush you with their talons or run you through with their big, sharp beaks if your electricity didn't chase them away. Maybe I needed to evolve and become a Raichu, but I didn't know how. There weren't any Raichu in the forest I lived in, or at least none that I saw. Maybe their rarity showed just how strong they were. There were so few of them because only the strongest of Pikachu could become Raichu. I was taught that it was better to be quick and crafty rather than to pick fights. To run instead of battle. All to survive. But when I was imprisoned by Team Rocket, the meaning of survival changed to being strong enough to endure attacks and strong enough to defeat my enemies. I evolved once to become stronger and survive, so what would I need to do to evolve again? I would do anything to gain the strength to protect Red and the others. I needed it that badly. The thought of strength and evolution was so great that when I finally fell asleep, all I could dream about was being a tiny Pichu being beaten up by several giant Raichu. XXX. The moment I woke up again, I spent the entire time brooding and thinking about how to get stronger than I already was. I wondered if Red knew, or if that Pokédex thing of his did, but I was too ashamed to come out of my ball and face him after my loss. I thought maybe he was ashamed of me, too, until I was sent out of my ball and into the familiar surroundings of a room at the Pokémon Center. Good morning. I heard Horsey exclaim. He was bouncing in front of a bowl of berries. Morning. Charmander and Bulbasaur, who were also seated around the bowl, casually greeted me before going back to eating berries. Before I could ask what was going on, I was pushed from behind towards the bowl. I looked back and saw Red, as apathetic as ever. Go on, eat up. We're going on the SS. And today, after last night, I think it's pretty much the only thing that will make us feel better for the moment. I stared down at the berries for a few seconds before picking up an Oran and nibbling at it. I didn't feel like I deserved food for my loss, so I wound up eating less than the others. Red really was too nice. While I was eating, I couldn't help but notice that Squirtle Red bothered to catch yesterday. He was sitting off in the corner of the room, facing a wall. He's still here, huh? I muttered. Even with his back turned to me, I could see the berries he was lifting up to his face. Charmander finished roasting a berry and gave it to Horsey before saying, he was picking fights with everyone this morning. First, he attacked Red when he tried to get to know him a little better, said Bulbasaur. Then he started picking on Horsey when he tried to be friendly to him. Charmander tried to get him to stop and he got sprayed with water. So I tried to discipline him and, let's just say potions had to be used afterwards. I wish you woke up sooner. You could have just zapped him the moment he started to act up, the jerk, Charmander mumbled meekly before he continued eating. Ah, I don't think he's so bad. Maybe he just needs time to get along with us. Horsey exclaimed. You're too nice. Charmander and Bulbasaur spoke at the same time. I sighed and forced myself to continue eating as well. XXX. I'd never seen a boat until we came to Vermilion City, but I could easily say that the SS. Anne was the biggest boat I'd ever seen when we were close enough, and according to Red, it was filled up with a bunch of people, which meant it was probably as busy as a town or a city. Once we got on, Red began to wander about while I stayed perched on his shoulder, wanting to stay as close to him as possible. We were here for a party, but since we didn't know where it was, Red wound up walking into the wrong room a lot. Sometimes there would be people inside. Some would say rude things and push him out, while others would ask if he was a trainer and challenge him to a battle. I got to see all kinds of Pokemon I'd never seen before, and many that even Red's Pokédex didn't know. At one point, we ran into this lady with a bunch of Pokemon that looked a little like me, things called Plusle and Minun, Dedenne, Pachirisu, Emolga, and to my fear and frustration, a Raichu. Red was able to beat the Raichu easily with Bulbasaur, though, which confused me. Was there something wrong with that lady's Raichu if Bulbasaur could beat it, or was there something wrong with me? The battle with the Raichu lady left me bitter for a while. I'd lost count of the rooms we'd been in by the time we entered one with a familiar person, that green girl we met back in Viridian Forest. From the moment we appeared in the doorway, she gasped and turned around to face us with a look of surprise on her face. After a few seconds of just standing there staring at each other, Green spoke, Oh. It's you. Red, right. Yeah, Red. Red spoke simply. The look of surprise left Green's face as she began playing with her hair. Do you remember my name, then? You're Green. The brown-haired girl laughed behind her hand as she slipped on her little green backpack. Right. Have I been invading your thoughts since we met? Keeping you awake at night? Not really. Red's answer made Green suddenly frown and huff. She then calmed down and pointed at him. Geez, that's a shiner. You didn't look like the type of boy who'd go around picking fights. She was talking about Red's black eye, which he'd gotten from Squirtle the day before. Although the swelling had gone down, the purplish bruise easily stuck out on his very pale skin. I had an accident, was all Red would say. Green's eyes then glinted in a shady-seeming way before she said, I'm surprised a kid like you has the money to get on a swanky ship like this. Did you sneak on? Come on, you can tell me. Actually, my ticket was a reward for helping someone. They didn't wanna go to the party. The party? You mean the one on the third floor, on the upper deck? Is that where it is? I guess I should find my way up there, then. Nice seeing you again, Red said as he turned to go back out into the hall. Green grabbed him and forced him to turn around to see her smirking face. Hey, I've got an idea. I've got time to kill, so why don't you show me your Pokémon? Why? Because I wanna see if you've caught anything new. Duh. Green then began to pout cutely, her lips quivering and eyes shining brightly. Pretty please, won't you show me your Pokémon, Red? Red looked confused for a few seconds before he did as Green asked. He walked into the room, closed the door behind him, and sent out Charmander, Bulbasaur, Horsey and Squirtle, the latter of whom looked annoyed. But despite Squirtle's attitude, Green squealed in a way that reminded me of the Zubat in the caves of Mt. Moon. They're so adorable. Although, she squinted her eyes before reaching into her bag and taking out a book with pictures of Pokémon on it. She leafed through the book as she said, your Bulbasaur, Charmander and Squirtle don't look a thing like the ones in the book. Pokémon can vary in appearance the way humans can, you know. Red quickly tried to cover for his Pokémon. I guess. But even if they looked normal, they wouldn't be halfway as cute as that Horsey. Green exclaimed with a smile. Horsey wound up blushing and giggling from her compliment, but he soon stopped with Green's next words. I want it. What? Red and I asked at the same time. I want your Horsey. I sighed and glared at her. Are you gonna try and take Red's Pokémon by force again? Because I still hadn't forgiven her for trying to steal me. If you want to battle again, Red began. Oh, no, no, no. I don't have time for battling. How about we make a trade instead? I'd be willing to trade you my Nidorina so your Nidoran could have a girlfriend. Green said with a wink. Red flinched and looked down at the floor. My Nidorino died some time ago. He wasn't crying as he said that, but he sounded like he was straining to keep his voice monotone. Green looked like she was in a panic. Oh, my gosh. Really? What happened? Actually. Wait, no. Don't tell me. I don't wanna know, she exclaimed as she waved her arms frantically in the air. They both fell silent, and in seconds, the girl ran forward and hugged Red so tightly that I fell off of his shoulder. You poor thing. How awful for you to have to go through such a thing. Green cried as she shook Red and turned around with him until she was the one standing in front of the door. Keep your Horsey. I don't want to tear another Pokémon from you before it's time. Thank you, Red spoke, sounding surprised from the sudden contact. Green stepped back, holding a hand behind her back. I should get going now. But maybe we'll meet again, Red. Ciao. She blew him a kiss, but it got no reaction from Red. With a huff, she left the room, slamming the door behind her. Well, that was interesting, said Red as picked me up and placed me back on his shoulder. At least she was more understanding than she was the last time. Yeah, and all it took was saying that Nidorino died. Anyway, we know where the party is now. All we've got to do is go up until we're outside again. XXX. So we went up some stairs, but as Red rounded a corner, he bumped into someone. Hey, watch where you go, Red. That person turned out to be Blue. I could feel my dislike rising to the surface already as he said, what's someone like you doing on a fancy boat like this? Did you sneak on like a stowaway? Is that how you got that black eye? Blue poked Red's black eye and smirked. I didn't know you were a little deviant. Red frowned and stared at Blue in silence. After a few seconds, and when Blue was close to fuming, my trainer answered, someone gave me a ticket to the party on board, so I decided to go. Charity. Huh. Well, that's how I got my ticket. One of Gramps' aides came to me with a ticket. Gramps got invited to the party, but said he was busy with research. So he thought I'd enjoy it. That was nice of him. Yeah, nice of him to expose us to this nuisance. Hey, let me tell ya something. I've already got 4 badges. I beat the Vermilion City gym just yesterday. 4. We don't even have 3 badges and this little jerk's got 4 of them. I know. I heard from Daisy. Oh. At least I know why we rushed into the gym the other night. Red wanted to catch up to Blue as quick as possible. I understand. I wouldn't want to trail behind of a guy like that. You did, huh? Well, I've also caught 40 different kinds of Pokemon already. Red stiffened again. 40. Why catch so many? Duh. I'm gonna be the champion, so I need to find the right Pokemon for a team that can stand up to anything. Right now, though, I'm only training for. Blue put his hands on his hips and leaned in closer to Red. So, Red, what have you accomplished since we last met in Cerulean City? Red opened his mouth to answer, but the words never left his mouth, because Blue spoke again. Of course, the best way to see how another trainer's improved is with a battle. I mean, you've owed me one since Pewter City. Red looked thoughtful for a short while before nodding. Sure. I accept your challenge. Great. We'll battle right here in the hall. Blue exclaimed as he took out a Pokeball. Isn't that unsafe? Just about everybody's either in their cabins or up on the deck. Nobody's gonna be coming, so stop making excuses. XXX. Seconds later, Red was standing at one end of the hall and Blue was standing at the other. All right. So you understand that we're going until one of us is out of Pokemon that can battle? Blue asked. Yeah. Okay. Then to start off, I choose Pidgeotto. Go. In a flash of light, a Pidgeotto appeared in midair a few feet in front of Blue, cawing and flapping its wings. I caught this Pidgeotto in Viridian Forest, the only one I saw there among all the Pidgey, a rare sight. He's like a symbol of my good luck. I couldn't care less what that bird represented to Blue. I felt like this was another chance to redeem myself, if only a tiny bit. But while I thought Red would choose the most effective Pokemon to fight me, he had someone else in mind. In a flash of light, my trainer sent out Horsey. A Horsey. I'm surprised you were able to get that thing to stand properly on land. Just watch my Pidgeotto knock it down with quick attack. The bird Pokemon caught circling above Horsey and then swooping down to tackle into him, making him fall over. Do it again. Make a twister around yourself. Red commanded. Horsey jumped back onto his tail, cried out and a small twister formed around him. When the Pidgeotto flew into the twister, it was sent flying back, but caught itself in midair. Blue looked surprised for a few seconds before he seemed impressed. Pretty interesting. Red. I've never seen a move like that before. The other boy smirked. It'll be fun to tear down your little defense. Pidgeotto. Counter the twister by making one of your own with gust. The Pidgeotto backed off and began flapping its wings quickly. Almost immediately, a powerful gust of wind began to be blown in our direction. Then, a second twister formed in front of Blue's Pidgeotto, looking bigger than Horsey's. Pidgeotto's twister was then pushed forward into Horsey's. The two twisters pushed back against each other until Horsey's dispersed and he was sucked up into Pidgeotto's twister, tossed about inside of it until he hit the ceiling and it dispersed. Nice. Now use quick attack again. Blue exclaimed. Use ink shot when it's close. Red shouted. Pidgeotto caught and flew up towards Horsey as he was falling from the ceiling. Luckily for Horsey, he was falling in a way that allowed him to see the blur of his oncoming target. Horsey spat out a burst of hardened ink into Pidgeotto's face seconds before the bird rammed into him. Pidgeotto landed on the floor to try and brush the ink out of its eyes while Horsey dropped onto the floor. Horsey, can you keep going? Red called out. Come on. Get up. Don't let this bird beat you. I shouted. Horsey twitched for a few seconds before finding it in him to bounce back onto his tail, although the way he was wobbling unsteadily said he was close to fainting. Still, I cheered for him. Way to go. You can still do it. That's an impressive Horsey ya got there. Lots of improvised attacks, too, Blue said with a smirk. Too bad it's about to be put out of its misery. Pidgeotto, use quick attack. Take aim and use ink shot. Pidgeotto, after wasting a few more seconds wiping the ink out of its eyes. At the same time, Horsey was trying to keep his balance. Once they were both finished, the bird quickly darted towards the small water type, just as he fired another ink bullet. The ink hit the Pidgeotto in the face once more, but it still wound up tackling into Horsey. They both fell down, not even twitching. "I think they both knocked each other out," said Red. "What? No way. My Pidgeotto's stronger than a dinky Horsey," Blue shouted. He huffed and returned his unconscious Pokémon to its ball. "Whatever. At least we've learned a new tactic in the process." Red returned Horsey to his ball with a smile. "You did great. I'm really proud of you." His smile quickly faded and he regained his usual apathetic expression. "Okay. Now I'm gonna be a bit more serious," Blue exclaimed as he got out another ball. "Go. Raticate." In a flash of light, another familiar Pokémon appeared on Blue's side of the battlefield. Raticate had always been a bit intimidating to me as a Pichu because they always looked like they were glaring at everything, and of course, they liked to use their big, long teeth to chew and bite anything. Take those traits away, though, and it was just an oversized rat. Sure hope your next choice is a rock or ghost type, because my Raticate'll bite through whatever other type there is like a toothpick. Red remained silent as he adjusted his hat and began to look thoughtful. As much as I didn't want to be on the receiving end of Eradicate's fangs, I was hoping he would call on me next. But my heart sank as Red took out another Pokeball and sent out Charmander. My mood picked up a bit when Blue sputtered at the sight of the fire type. "A Charmander. How did you get a Charmander?" "I caught him," Red answered simply and honestly. "In the wild." "I don't believe you," the other boy shouted. He took a breath and sighed before running a hand through his hair. "Whatever. My Raticate will knock it out in an instant. Raticate, get in close with quick attack and then bite it," Blue commanded. "Ember. Charmander," Red called. As the Raticate ran towards Charmander, the fire type spat out tiny embers to stop it in its tracks. However, the Raticate kept dodging the embers that were fired at it. The big rat pounced Charmander once it was close enough and bit down into his body. Charmander gave a terrible screech of pain as he struggled in its hold. "Use the flame on your tail to burn it," Red commanded. Charmander did as he was told and wagged his tail to brush the flame at its tip against Raticate's tail. This was enough to make the Raticate let him go to cry out in pain. "Now use Ember and force it off." Charmander spat some embers into the bigger Pokemon's face, burning it further, and then managed to shove the Raticate off of him. Charmander got back onto his feet, holding onto the part of his torso that Raticate had bitten. "See, Charmander or not, my Raticate's just too strong," Blue boasted. "Now go in for the finisher. Use Hyper Fang." Charmander, Dragon Rage. As the Raticate pounced at Charmander, he breathed out blue flames that engulfed the rat Pokémon. It cried out in pain and only succeeded in pushing Charmander over before dropping down on the floor and rolling away from him. Eventually, the Raticate stopped and got back onto its feet, looking even more upset than it would normally. On the ground, Charmander cried out in pain from his injury. His crying quickly became roaring and he was suddenly engulfed in a bright white light. I recognized what was going on as Charmander's figure, now only a shadow within the light, began to change shape. When the light faded, he'd taken on a new form. He had evolved. He was bigger, had a horn on the back of his head, and was covered in thick-looking red scales. The flame at the tip of his tail was now larger and burning fiercely. "Wow, Charmeleon," Red spoke in awe as he took out his Pokédex to check the new Pokémon. "Evolving won't save you. Raticate. Hyper Fang," Blue exclaimed. Red snapped the Pokédex shut. "Charmeleon. Leer." Charmeleon roared as his eyes glowed bright red for a brief moment. He gave the approaching Raticate an intimidating glare that was intense enough to make it stop in its tracks, and even step back from fear. "Now use Scratch." Charmeleon jumped onto the Raticate, pinned it to the floor, and then began to slash at it brutally with his new claws. After a few seconds, it was starting to seem like too much. Charmeleon, that's enough. Charmeleon looked back at Red and growled before returning to pummeling Raticate. As the fire type continued scratching away at what I assumed was an unconscious Pokémon, Red pointed his Pokeball at him and returned him inside. What is wrong with you? Just calm down, he whispered to the ball. HMPH. Luck. That's all it was. You're lucky that Charmander of yours evolved. Otherwise, I would have won, said Blue as he returned his unconscious Raticate into its ball. My next Pokemon'll throw you for a loop. Taking out another ball. This one blue with red stripes on it. Blue sent out his next Pokemon. Unlike the last two, I had never seen it before. It was bright yellow, though part of its upper body was dark brown. It had a big tail, a pair of hanging whiskers that looked like a mustache on a human, and it was holding a spoon in its hand. Check it out. I managed to catch an Abra before it slipped away, and I was able to train it up into a Kadabra. Just my luck, right? Red mumbled things to himself, a psychic type. All I have left are Bulbasaur, Squirtle and Pikachu. But I guess I have no choice. My expression brightened. Once again, I thought he was talking about me, but he dashed my hopes once more when he took out a Pokeball. And of all of us, he sent out that Squirtle. You trying to catch a collection of freaky-looking starter Pokémon, Red? Seriously, of all the dumb luck, Blue muttered before he started to smirk again. Not that its rarity is gonna do any good against my Kadabra's psychic attacks. I have faith in Squirtle. The same Squirtle who just turned around to stick his tongue out at Red. He should have just chosen me. You can have faith that he'll be knocked out faster than you can blink. Kadabra, use Confusion. Squirtle, use Bubble Beam. But instead of doing that, Squirtle pulled his head and limbs into his shell. Squirtle, what are you doing? He's being a jerk, that's what he's doing. Kadabra's eyes began to glow bright purple while Squirtle, hid in his shell. Squirtle was hit by an unseen force, the only way of noticing it being the sound it made upon hitting his shell. Got a disrespectful Pokemon, huh? They say if a Pokemon doesn't obey its trainer, it's sign of how unskilled they are, Blue spoke. Pretty sloppy. Red said nothing to his rival and focused his attention on Squirtle. Come on, Squirtle, even if you don't like me that much yet, I can tell you don't like to lose. So get up and fight. Squirtle got out of his shell, but I don't think it was for Red's sake. No, he did it to tease Blue's Kadabra. The water type turned around to shake his tail tauntingly at the psychic Pokemon, who responded by looking as apathetic as Red. Blue had bent over with laughter now. Was that a pep talk? Coming for the poster boy of anti-pep. Ha ha ha. I glared at the other boy. When he finally shut up, he had that stupid smirk on his face. Don't worry, Red. My Kadabra can make him stop hiding. Use Disable. Blue's Kadabra held up its spoon as its eyes glowed bright yellow. Squirtle laughed before trying to pull his head and limbs back into his shell, only to fail. He continued to try and withdraw into his shell, eventually crying out in frustration. Kadabra, use Confusion. Kadabra's eyes glowed bright purple once more before Squirtle was pushed back by something. It still didn't seem to harm him much physically, but the way he held onto his head suggested that Kadabra was causing him a different kind of pain. Keep it up. Squirtle, use Bubble Beam. Red exclaimed. Squirtle, still taking the force of Kadabra's psychic attacks, took a deep breath and sprayed out a stream of foam and bubbles at the Kadabra while it was attacking. The moment his Bubble Beam hit the Kadabra and covered it in bubbles, Squirtle was forced back by its psychic power, but remained standing. Yes. Way to go, Squirtle. Squirtle snorted and looked back at Red to stick his tongue out at him. Now use Bite. Snorting once again, the irritated water type lowered his head and ran towards Blue's Kadabra. Oh, going for Skull Bash, huh? Kadabra. Teleport. Blue commanded. Just as Squirtle jumped headfirst at the Kadabra, it glowed bright white and suddenly vanished. Squirtle wound up falling onto the floor with a heavy-sounding thud. Kadabra then reappeared a few feet behind of Squirtle just as he started to get up. As soon as Squirtle had turned around, he lowered his head and went for another skull bash, but the same thing happened. This continued to happen even as Red tried to tell him stop. Eventually, Squirtle wound up tiring himself out and just laid there on the floor, panting. There's a difference between persistence and stupidity. I finally shouted loudly, making Red flinch since I was so close to his ear. Shut up, ya stupid electric rat. Squirtle snapped at me. I think this was the first time he'd spoken to me, or even spoken at all. An electric type that can't beat another electric type ain't allowed to criticize. What did you say to me? You better hope that Kadabra knocks you out before I do. Yeah, right. I could beat you one-on-one in a fair fight without you relying on shocking everything. Then it's not a fair fight, idiot. Be both of you, calm down. And please stop yelling, Red said as he began rubbing his forehead. This is more like a wild Pokemon battle than a fight with a trainer. Did you just catch this thing or what? Blue asked, sounding disappointed. Red was silent as Squirtle turned around to face Kadabra one more time. Enough playing around, Kadabra. Use confusion. While it's attacking, use bubble beam. Red exclaimed. I wasn't sure if Squirtle was now obeying Red or just decided to do that attack of his own accord, but he took a deep breath and sprayed foam and bubbles at the Kadabra while its eyes glowed bright purple. Its eyes suddenly stopped glowing, though, and it attempted to sidestep the attack, but it couldn't move in time and wound up falling over. I think I get it, Red mumbled. Teleport and confusion are both attacks that require Kadabra to focus. It can't do both at the same time, so it can't teleport to dodge while it's using its power to attack with confusion. What's more, Squirtle's bubble beam has a chance of slowing down those it hits, so it seems to have gotten slow enough to the point of Squirtle being able to attack it before its attacks hit him. Blue snorted. Feel proud for comprehending that. Yes. Well, just because your Squirtle's faster and it's been able to endure Kadabra's attacks, that doesn't mean it's going to win. Squirtle, use bite while Kadabra's down. Maybe the jerk realized Red was helpful, which was why he bothered to run towards the psychic type with his teeth bared. Kadabra, teleport now. Kadabra's body slowly got a white glow as Squirtle got closer. The water type jumped on top of the psychic type and took a bite out of its shoulder. It screamed out in pain and stopped glowing. In fact, it stopped moving period. Heh heh. In your face, ya psycho weirdo. Squirtle exclaimed before Blue returned his Pokemon into its ball. Squirtle. Way to go. Red complimented the water type. Just like in all the other battles we'd been in before, the turtle Pokemon stared at him in confusion and then huffed in annoyance before being returned to his ball. How on earth? Blue sounded annoyed. Even the smirk he had on his face when he looked at Red seemed forced. Well, maybe you're worthy of being my rival after all, Red. You might have more badges than I do at the moment, but I have no intentions of falling behind as a trainer, said Red as he narrowed his eyes. Good. Because I've got no intention of slowing down. Blue exclaimed as he took out another ball. This is my last Pokemon. I'm sure you know what it is. Yeah, Pikachu. It's time. I looked at Red in surprise. Was I being saved for this? I was still the ace. That made me feel so relieved. I thought maybe Red thought I was too weak to battle his rival. I jumped off of Red's shoulder and landed on the floor, raring to go and prove my strength. It's time to see who started with the better Pokemon. Go, Eevee. In a flash of light, Blue sent out a small, brown, and furry Pokemon called Eevee. I only recognized it because we ran into a few people on board who owned ones of their own. Blue. Eevee turned around to look at his trainer. Bluey. The Eevee ran over to Blue and jumped him, pushing him down to the floor in the process. Blue. Let's play. Blue. After that, Blue was struggling to pry his adoring Pokemon off of him. Though why anyone would adore him was beyond me. Eevee seems very playful, Red commented after Blue finally managed to get Eevee off of him and shooed him back over to me. Don't be fooled. He's a real brawler when he's in a fight. His rival snapped. Show him your growl, Eevee. Eevee growled at me, baring his teeth. I wasn't intimidated by it, though. In fact, it only compelled me into thinking that he wasn't so tough after all and that I didn't need to put in much effort to beat him. Pikachu. Use Tail Whip to distract it. I did as Red commanded. I turned around and began to wag my tail back and forth. Eevee stopped growling and approached me to start batting at my tail like it was some sort of toy. Now he really didn't seem so tough. Maybe this fight would be easier to win than I thought. Tackle. Eevee. Dodge with quick attack and strike from behind. I sped out of the way before Eevee could headbutt me from behind, then I went behind him and tackled him in the back. The Eevee didn't falter when he was hit by my attack. Instead, he took that as the moment to kick me with his hind feet. It hurt more than I thought, and I wound up jumping back to avoid getting another blow. Pikachu. Thunder Wave. I charged electricity before zapping the smaller Pokemon just enough to paralyze him. I couldn't help smirking when his movements got a bit slower. I was going to win this. I could feel it. Now. Thunder Shock. Bite. Eevee. I charged up electricity as Blue's Eevee ran towards me. Despite being slowed by paralysis, my opponent was able to jump on top of me and push me down. Eevee took a bite out of my arm and in response, I unleashed my pent-up electricity to shock him. Eevee jumped off of me and stepped away, still looking ready to fight despite looking so banged up. He was definitely tougher than he looked. But I was sure I could knock him out with a few more blows. Time to finish him off, Eevee. Use Tackle. Blue exclaimed. Pikachu. Use Slam, said Red. At our trainer's orders, Eevee and I reared back in preparation and dashed towards each other. I braced myself for the oncoming blow, determined to be the one left standing. When Eevee was close enough, he rammed his head against mine. I held up against the attack, but just barely. Dealing with the pain, I spun around to strike the smaller Pokemon with my tail. Eevee tried to dodge, but he suddenly stiffened and froze in place, paralyzed. My tail struck him in the face, knocking him aside and into a wall. Eevee fell to the floor and didn't look like he was getting up. I felt proud, and beat up. For a tiny little guy, he sure did hit hard. I refused to collapse from exhaustion, though, and kept up a brave face as Blue returned Eevee into his ball. HMPH. At least you're raising your Pokemon. But that was just luck, you know. Blue asked as he approached Red, completely ignoring me. I know your Eevee knows dig, said Red. But you probably didn't use it since we were on the second floor of a boat. The blue-clad boy smirked. So you realize that I was just taking it easy on you and I would have won if I had Eevee go all out. Number. Pikachu would still win even if we were battling outside. Hearing Red say that made me happy, and at the same time, it just put more pressure on me. He had so much faith in me that I couldn't standing letting him down again. Hey. Keep dreamin'. Smell ya later. Blue said goodbye in his own weird way, saluting Red before he went downstairs. Red approached me, crouched down, and gave me a small smile. He stroked my back and scratched my ears, mumbling about how proud he was of me. Sorry if this is a late apology, but I'm sorry for what happened last night. I looked up at him confusion, but I realized he was talking about what happened with Surge. We didn't lose because you were weak. We lost because I rushed in without a plan or any training. It's just that I can't stand the thought of being left in the dust by Blue. Red fell silent for a few seconds and stared down at the ground. We used to be close friends. He was always number one and I was number two. I can't bear trailing too far behind of Blue, because it feels like he'd leave me in his dust and all alone. That sounds stupid, doesn't it? It does. Very stupid. I spoke flatly as I nodded my head. But that's what my relationship with Blue's always been. And maybe that sometimes makes me a bit competitive. Competition is good, if you don't let it go to your head. Red's face regained its usual apathetic expression as he looked back at me. Anyway, I'll try not to get obsessed with keeping up with Blue. Even if he becomes the Indigo League champion before me, I can always beat him afterwards. But for now, let's train to beat Lieutenant Surge. Would you be up to challenging him again? But I need to evolve again if I want to beat that Raichu, I told him with a pout, despite knowing he didn't know what I said. I'm sure it was damaging to your confidence to get beaten up by his Raichu. The easy way out would be finding a Thunderstone and using that to make you evolve into a Raichu. But I think that if we actually put in the time to train, we could win. Red picked me up and held me out in front of me as he stood up. Do you agree with me, Pikachu? A part of me refused to believe that until it actually happened before my eyes. But most of me had been convinced that I could win without having to become a Raichu. If I could beat my fully evolved form, I think I'd never have to evolve to be able to protect Red. If not, I swear I won't let Red rest until he finds a Thunderstone to fix this problem.